My name is Lucas, and for the past 2 years, my life has felt like walking through a foggy, silent forest. Jennifer, my wife of 10 years, the woman I once believed was my soulmate, has become a stranger. The distance between us started as a small crack, barely noticeable, but over time, it has widened into a chasm so deep, I fear it may never be bridged. It began with subtle changes. Jennifer grew colder, her smiles rarer, and her touch almost non-existent. Our late-night talks faded into silence. Even our daughter Olivia, now 8, began to notice. "Why doesn't Mommy laugh anymore?" she asked me one night, her innocent question cutting deeper than she could understand. I chalked it up to stress at first. Life throws curveballs, right? Jennifer had always been the anchor in our little family, balancing her career with motherhood and still managing to be my best friend. I thought maybe the weight of it all had become too much. Maybe she was burnt out, or perhaps she was facing something she couldn't yet name. I tried to help, but my efforts fell flat. When I asked if she was okay, she'd brush it off with a cold, "I'm fine," or change the subject. Attempts at intimacy, both emotional and physical, were met with rejection. At first, her refusals were kind, almost apologetic. But as time passed, they grew sharper, as though my attempts were burdens to her. Months turned into years, and my confusion turned into frustration. I suggested therapy, but she shot the idea down. "There's nothing wrong," she'd say, though her actions spoke otherwise. Nights in bed became a silent reminder of what we had lost. Through it all, I told myself it was a phase, that Jennifer would snap out of it. I clung to hope, not for myself, but for Olivia. She needed her family whole, her parents together. I thought if I could endure this storm, we'd emerge stronger on the other side. But enduring wasn't easy. Every day, the weight of Jennifer's coldness grew heavier. Every moment of silence in our home felt like a betrayal of the love we had once promised each other. Still, I held on. For Olivia, for the family we had built, for the woman I had once known. The idea that Jennifer might be cheating on me began as a faint whisper in the back of my mind, growing louder with every passing day. I didn't want to think it, much less believe it. But how else could I explain her behavior? The rejection, the distance, it had to be more than stress or fatigue. The thought gnawed at me, even though it felt like a betrayal of my own vows to doubt her in this way. I started to notice things, or at least I thought I did. A text message she'd closed too quickly, nights out with friends she never used to have, a new perfume I didn't remember her buying. Little things, subtle, but enough to set my mind racing. I began to investigate, quietly at first. I checked her phone one night while she was asleep. My hands trembled as I scrolled through her messages, my breath caught in my throat. But there was nothing. No secret conversations, no hidden apps, no unexplained calls. Her social media was equally mundane. Family photos, casual posts about work, nothing out of the ordinary. Still, I couldn't shake the suspicion. One evening, when Jennifer said she was meeting a friend for coffee, I followed her. I felt like a fool sitting in my car a block away, watching her walk into a cafe. She really did meet a friend, a woman I recognized from her office. They laughed and chatted like old times, and I sat there feeling both relieved and ashamed of myself. After a few more failed attempts at uncovering the truth, I reluctantly concluded that Jennifer wasn't having an affair. She wasn't living some secret life behind my back. But if that was true, then what was going on? The real answer, I would later learn, was hidden in a place I'd never even thought to look. Despite my failures at uncovering her secrets, I couldn't let go of my need to fix what was broken. One evening, after Olivia had gone to bed, I decided to confront Jennifer directly. I couldn't dance around it anymore. "Jennifer, we need to talk," I said, my voice low but firm. She looked up from her book, a guarded expression on her face. "About what?" "About us." I sat across from her, leaning forward, trying to meet her eyes. "About why you don't want me anymore." She flinched as if I'd struck her. "Lucas, that's not fair." "Isn't it?" I countered, my frustration bubbling to the surface. "We're young, Jennifer. We're supposed to be partners, lovers. not just two people sharing a house. Her mouth opened as if to argue, but she hesitated. Finally, she sighed. Lucas, sex isn't everything. It's not the most important thing in a marriage. I'm not saying it is, I said, trying to keep my voice steady. But the lack of it, of any intimacy, it's a big problem. And we both know it. Jennifer's face turned defensive. Why can't we just be happy without it? Plenty of couples are. Are they? I asked, incredulous. Because I don't believe that for a second. What you're saying might work for some people, but it doesn't work for us. It doesn't work for me. Jennifer avoided my gaze, her fingers fidgeting with the edge of her book. I don't know what you want me to say. I want you to explain what's going on, I said, my voice rising slightly despite myself. You've shut me out for 2 years, Jennifer. I've tried everything I can think of. I've been patient. I've suggested therapy. No, she snapped, cutting me off. Her reaction startled me. No therapy. Why not? I demanded. If we're not going to fix this ourselves, we need help. There's no shame in that. Jennifer shook her head, her expression a mixture of fear and defiance. I don't need a stranger telling me what's wrong with my life. Then tell me, I said, my voice quieter now, almost pleading. Whatever it is, we'll deal with it together. She didn't answer right away. Instead, she stared at the floor, her lips pressed into a tight line. When she finally spoke, her voice was barely above a whisper. I can't. That word lingered in the room like a heavy fog. I sat there, staring at the woman I had loved for a decade, feeling more lost than ever. Whatever was going on, Jennifer was terrified to face it. And for the first time, I began to wonder if I had the strength to face it with her. The silence between us grew heavier with each passing second, the kind that makes the air feel thick and hard to breathe. Jennifer finally broke it, her voice tinged with nervousness. Lucas, don't exaggerate, she said, forcing a weak smile. We rarely have intimate relations. It's not as bad as you're making it out to be. I felt something inside me snap. Rarely? I said, my tone sharper than I intended. Jennifer, over the past 2 years, it's happened maybe a handful of times. And even then, I felt guilty, like I was pressuring you. Do you know what that feels like? Her face hardened, but I didn't stop. Think back to our first 5 years together, I continued. We were happy, in every sense of the word. We both wanted each other. We both made an effort. Now I feel like a stranger to you, like you can't even stand to look at me. Jennifer's cheeks flushed with anger. Women don't want it as much as men, Lucas. That's just biology. It's natural. Her words struck me like a slap. It wasn't just what she said, but the way she said it, as if this absurd explanation was supposed to settle everything. I stared at her, trying to process what I was hearing. This wasn't the Jennifer I married, the woman who used to laugh at the idea of stereotypes, who once told me our relationship was a partnership in every way. But now I realized this topic wasn't just painful for her, it was something else entirely. She was hiding behind these excuses, shielding herself from a truth she wasn't ready to face. And that truth, whatever it was, remained as elusive as ever. I exhaled slowly, forcing myself to stay calm. This isn't about biology or natural differences, I said quietly. This is about us, about what's broken between us and how we fix it. Jennifer didn't respond. She just sat there, her arms crossed, staring past me as if I wasn't even in the room. It was in that moment that I realized I wasn't going to get through to her, not tonight, and maybe not ever. I stood up, my chair scraping against the floor. I need some time to think, I said, my voice flat. About everything. Jennifer looked up, startled, but she didn't try to stop me. I walked out of the room and into the quiet sanctuary of our backyard, the cool night air filling my lungs. For the next week, I carried the weight of our broken marriage like an anchor around my neck, dragging it with me wherever I went. I thought about Olivia, our bright, curious daughter who adored us both. The idea of her growing up in a broken home tore at me, But the truth was, our home was already broken. Staying together for her sake wasn't saving anything. It was just prolonging the inevitable. I thought about Jennifer too. About the woman I had fallen in love with. The woman who had shared my dreams and built a life with me. I didn't want to give up on her, on us. But how long could I keep fighting for someone who wouldn't fight for me? In the end, the decision wasn't made out of anger or resentment. It was made out of a sense of finality. I had been patient. I had tried everything I could. But sometimes, no matter how much you love someone, you can't make them love you back, not in the way you need. So, I made the hardest decision of my life. I decided to file for divorce. It wasn't an act of revenge or a way to hurt Jennifer. It was simply the last option I had left. To those of you reading or listening, I want you to understand this. I am not a man who gives up easily. I stayed longer than I should have because I believed in our family, in our love. But at some point, I had to accept the truth. Love can't survive on one person's efforts alone. Before you find out what happens next, please subscribe to the channel. A few days after my decision, I sat Jennifer down in the living room. Olivia was at a friend's house, giving us the privacy we needed for what I was about to say. My heart pounded as I prepared to tell her. This wasn't something I wanted, but it was something I felt I had to do. Jennifer, I began, my voice low and steady. I need to tell you something, and I hope you'll hear me out. She looked up from the mug of tea in her hands, her eyes wary. What is it? I've been to see a lawyer, I said, my words measured and deliberate. I've started the process to file for divorce. Her reaction was immediate, and it caught me off guard. Her face paled, and her hands began to tremble, causing the tea to slosh over the rim of her mug. For a moment, she just stared at me as if I had spoken in a foreign language. What? What are you talking about? She stammered, her voice cracking. I've thought about this for a long time, Jennifer, I said, forcing myself to hold her gaze. I can't keep going like this. We've both been unhappy for too long, and I don't see things changing. No, she whispered, her voice filled with disbelief. Lucas, you don't mean that. You can't mean that. I do, I said softly. I'm sorry, but I've made up my mind. For the first time in years, I saw something in Jennifer's face that I hadn't seen before. Fear. Real, raw fear. Tears welled up in her eyes, and her breathing grew shallow and uneven. She tried to speak, but her words came out in fragments, broken by sobs. Please, she said finally, her voice trembling. Please don't rush into this. We can talk. We can figure something out. Her desperation tugged at something deep inside me, but I couldn't let it sway me. Jennifer, I've tried to talk, and I've tried to figure things out. For 2 years, I've tried. But you've made it clear that you don't want to go to therapy, and I can't fix this on my own. She shook her head, tears streaming down her cheeks. I need time, she said through her sobs. I need some time. Then take some time, I said gently. She looked at me, her tear-streaked face filled with a mix of sorrow and disbelief. Then she nodded, almost imperceptibly. I'll go to my parents, she said, her voice barely audible. I need to think. Go stay with your family for a while if you need to. I'll look after Olivia and the house. I helped her pack a small bag later that evening. It was strange, intimate in a way we hadn't been in years, yet heavy with the weight of what was happening. When she left, I felt a pang of guilt watching her car pull out of the driveway. Despite everything, part of me still cared for her. But I knew this was the right decision for both of us. A couple of days later, the calls started. First, it was Jennifer's sister, Lisa. She called under the pretense of checking on Olivia, but quickly turned the conversation to the divorce. Lucas, she said, her tone cautious but firm. I know this is none of my business, but Jennifer told me what's going on. Are you sure this is what you want? I am, I replied, trying to sound resolute. It's not a decision I made lightly, Lisa. Look, I know things have been tough between you two, she said. But maybe you should think about giving it another shot. Jennifer's, well, she's not in a good place right now. I sighed, choosing my words carefully. I understand, Lisa, but this isn't just about Jennifer. I'm not in a good place either. This isn't the life I want for either of us. She paused, then asked hesitantly, "Is there someone else, Lucas? Is that why—" "No," I said firmly, cutting her off. "This has nothing to do with anyone else. I haven't been unfaithful, and I never would be." Lisa seemed relieved, but still unconvinced. "I just hope you're sure about this. For Olivia's sake, if nothing else." The call ended on an uneasy note, but I was soon faced with another, even more difficult conversation. Jennifer's father. His voice, usually warm and reassuring, was laced with tension when he called me that evening. "Lucas," he began, "Jennifer told us about the divorce. I don't know what's going on between you two, but I want to ask you to think carefully before you make this final." "Mr. Carter," I said, my voice steady, "I've thought about this for a long time. This isn't a decision I've made out of anger or haste." He hesitated, then said, "We've always seen you as a good husband and father. I just can't understand how things could have gone so wrong." I avoided the more personal details, saying only, "Sometimes things just don't work out the way we hope. I've tried to do everything I can to make this work, but it's not enough." He sighed, his disappointment clear. "I respect you, Lucas. I really do. But I hope you'll reconsider." As the calls ended, I couldn't shake the weight of their words. But I also knew that my decision was the right one. For me, for Jennifer, and for Olivia. Sometimes doing what's right doesn't feel good. It just feels necessary. The days after Jennifer left for her parents' home were quieter than I expected. Olivia seemed to sense something was off, but didn't ask too many questions. I tried to keep things as normal as possible for her, making her favorite meals, helping with homework, and going through our usual bedtime routine. Still, the thought of telling her about the divorce loomed over me like a storm cloud. When Olivia was at school, I started packing some of my belongings. I didn't want her to see me doing it yet. It felt too soon to break the news. Most of the essentials were easy to gather: clothes, a few books, and personal items I didn't want to leave behind. But when I ventured into the attic to sort through old keepsakes and junk, I found myself drawn to an old photo album from my childhood. I thought it might comfort me to look back on simpler times. The attic was a mess of half-forgotten boxes and dust-coated mementos. I rummaged through them, pushing aside holiday decorations and unmarked storage bins. That's when my elbow accidentally bumped a box off a stack, sending its contents spilling onto the floor. "Damn it," I muttered, crouching to pick up the papers. Most of them were old bills and receipts, useless junk we should have thrown out years ago. But as I gathered the mess, two papers caught my attention. The first was an STD test. Jennifer's name was on it, and the date showed it was from 2 years ago. My eyes scanned the page, my breath catching in my throat as I read the result. Positive. "What the hell?" I whispered to myself. The second paper was another STD test, dated 4 months after the first. This one was negative. My mind raced as I tried to make sense of it. Jennifer had contracted an STD and then undergone treatment to clear it. There was only one explanation. She had to have cheated on me. The realization hit me like a freight train. The coldness, the distance, her refusal to go to therapy. It all made sense now. She must have been carrying the shame and guilt of what she'd done, unable to face me or herself. I sank to the floor, the papers trembling in my hands. My stomach churned with a mix of anger, disgust, and sadness. I thought back to the past 2 years, replaying every moment in my mind, trying to find the signs I had missed. As much as it hurt, one thing became clear. I had made the right decision to file for divorce. I don't know how long I sat there staring at those papers, but my thoughts were interrupted by the sound of the doorbell. I tucked the tests back into the box and wiped my hands on my jeans as I made my way downstairs. When I opened the door, Lisa stood there, holding a small envelope. "Hey, Lucas," she said, offering a tentative smile. "Can I come in?" "Sure," I said, stepping aside to let her in. Lisa set her purse down and turned to face me. I came to check on you and Olivia. I thought I could take her out for a bit, maybe to the park or the movies, give you some time to yourself." I nodded, grateful for the gesture. "That would be great. Thanks, Lisa." She handed me the envelope. "Jennifer asked me to give this to you. She's trying to make things right." I opened the envelope and pulled out a postcard. It was an invitation to a high-end hotel, complete with a dinner reservation and a room for the night. The date on the card was for tomorrow evening. "She said she wants to talk," Lisa added, "to fix things if possible." I stared at the invitation, my emotions in turmoil. Fix things? After everything I had just discovered? But as much as I didn't want to face her, I knew I had to. If not for closure, then for the sake of clarity, for myself and for Olivia. "Thanks, Lisa," I said, slipping the card back into the envelope. "I'll go." Lisa nodded, her expression a mix of hope and concern. "I'll take Olivia tomorrow evening then. You'll have the night to figure things out." I watched her leave, feeling the weight of the situation pressing down on me. Jennifer had planned a romantic evening, likely hoping to rekindle something that had long since died. But this wasn't going to be a night of reconciliation. It was going to be a reckoning, a final, honest conversation that neither of us could avoid any longer. The next evening I found myself driving to the hotel, my mind racing. I wasn't sure what to expect from Jennifer, but I knew I had to confront her, not with anger, but with a need for clarity. For too long we had lived in shadows, avoiding the truth. Tonight, that would change. When I arrived, Jennifer was already waiting for me at the hotel's elegant restaurant. She looked beautiful, her hair styled in a way I hadn't seen in years, her dress simple, yet stunning. For a moment, I felt a pang of nostalgia for the woman I had fallen in love with, but I quickly reminded myself why we were here. "Lucas," she said warmly as I approached the table, "thank you for coming." I nodded, pulling out a chair. "Thank you for inviting me." At first, we stuck to small talk. The food, Olivia, even the weather, safe topics that allowed us to ease into the evening without the weight of our issues crushing the mood. Jennifer seemed nervous, but determined, and I could tell she had rehearsed what she wanted to say. As the evening progressed, she began steering the conversation toward our past. She reminisced about our early years, our first apartment, the road trips we took, the nights we stayed up dreaming about our future. Her voice softened with each memory, and I couldn't deny the warmth that crept into my chest as I listened. "I know I've made mistakes, Lucas," she said after a pause, her eyes downcast. "I don't know why it took me so long to realize how far apart we'd drifted. Maybe I was scared. Maybe I didn't know how to fix it." I let her speak, noting how carefully she avoided mentioning the divorce. She spoke about needing support, about how she may have been wrong to push me away, but the words felt incomplete, as though she were tiptoeing around a much larger truth. When dinner was over, we walked to the room Jennifer had reserved. The space was lit softly, with candles flickering on the nightstands and a bottle of wine chilling by the window. The romantic atmosphere felt intentional, calculated. I followed her inside, unsure of what to expect. Jennifer excused herself to the bathroom, murmuring something about freshening up. When she returned, she had changed into something far more striking, a sleek black dress that clung to her figure and left little to the imagination. She smiled at me, a nervous but hopeful smile that made her intentions clear. "Lucas," she said softly, stepping closer. "I wanted tonight to be about us, about remembering what we had." I stood, gently stopping her as she reached for me. "Jennifer, wait." Her face fell slightly, confusion flickering in her eyes. "What's wrong?" "Please sit down," I said, motioning to the bed. "We need to talk." Reluctantly, she sat on the edge of the bed while I took a seat in the chair across from her. I took a deep breath, gathering my thoughts. "First, I want to thank you for taking this step," I began, "for trying to fix things. It means a lot." She nodded, her hands fidgeting in her lap. "Of course. I just want to make things right." I leaned forward, resting my elbows on my knees. "Jennifer, for the past few years, I've been searching for a reason. trying to understand what went wrong between us, and for the longest time, I couldn't figure it out. She watched me intently, her expression guarded. But then, I continued, reaching into my bag and pulling out the papers I had found in the attic. I found these. Her eyes widened as she recognized the STD tests. She froze, her face draining of color. I wasn't looking for them, I said quickly. I came across them by accident, but they explained so much. Jennifer's lips parted, but no words came out. Finally, she muttered, "Damn it, why did I forget to throw those away?" Her reaction stung more than I expected, but I pressed on. "Jennifer, I'm not here to punish you. I just want the truth. If we're going to go through with this divorce, I need to understand what happened. And if you lie to me now, I promise you, it'll make things much harder for you." She stared at the papers for what felt like an eternity, her hands trembling. Finally, she sighed, the fight draining out of her. "Okay," she whispered, her voice barely audible. "I'll tell you everything." Jennifer sat on the edge of the bed, her face pale and tear-streaked. For a moment, it seemed like she might back out, retreat into silence, but then she took a deep breath and began. "It happened 2 years ago," she said, her voice trembling. "You were away on a business trip for the week, and Olivia was staying with my parents. I was struggling at work, feeling, I don't know, lost, depressed maybe. I couldn't talk to you about it because you were so focused on your project, and I didn't want to burden you. I sat quietly, bracing myself for what was coming. Sarah, my friend from work, called me one evening," Jennifer continued. "She knew I wasn't in a good place, and she suggested we go out, have a few drinks, try to unwind. I didn't want to go, but she convinced me. We went to this bar and we drank a lot." Her voice broke, and she wiped at her eyes with the back of her hand. "Sarah met some guys there. I was ready to leave, Lucas, I swear, but she begged me to stay. One thing led to another, and we ended up at her house with those guys. I don't even remember how it all happened. It's such a blur. But I slept with one of them." She broke down, her sobs filling the room. "It was my biggest mistake. The next morning I felt disgusted with myself. I couldn't believe what I'd done. I wanted to tell you, but I was so afraid. Then, a few weeks later, I found out I'd contracted something. An STD. Jennifer paused, her eyes searching mine, perhaps hoping for some sign of understanding. I gave her none. I just sat there, my face a mask of stoicism, even though her words burned inside me. "I didn't know what to do," she said, her voice cracking again. "I couldn't tell you. I couldn't bear the thought of you knowing what I'd done. So I got treated in secret. At first, I avoided you because I didn't want to risk infecting you, but after the treatment, something changed. The guilt, the shame. It made any kind of intimacy unbearable for me. I couldn't look at you without remembering what I'd done." She covered her face with her hands, her voice muffled. "I was afraid to see a therapist because I didn't want my secret to come out. So I tried to deal with it on my own, but it just kept eating away at me." Jennifer lowered her hands, tears streaming down her cheeks. "Lucas, I'm sorry. I'm so sorry. It was one night, one stupid drunken mistake. I love you, and I never wanted to hurt you." Her words hung in the air, heavy and suffocating. I leaned back in my chair, trying to process what she had said. The betrayal, the lies, the secrecy. It was all too much. But at the same time, I could see how much she regretted it. Her remorse was genuine. Still, it didn't change what had happened. We talked for hours. Jennifer poured out her heart, answering every painful question I asked. She didn't try to deflect or make excuses, but her explanations didn't soften the blow. They only underscored how deeply she had failed me, and us. Finally, as the first light of dawn began to seep through the curtains, Jennifer made one last plea. "Lucas, please," she whispered, "give me a chance to make this right. I'll do whatever it takes. Therapy, counseling, anything. Just don't leave me. Don't give up on us." I sighed, running a hand through my hair. "Jennifer, I believe you're sorry. I can see that. And I believe you love me. But this This is too much." Her face crumpled, and I had to look away to keep from losing my resolve. "I can't forgive you," I said, my voice firm but not unkind. "A divorce is inevitable, but I don't want this to turn into a fight. For Olivia's sake, we need to do this the right way." Jennifer's sobs grew quieter as she realized there was no changing my mind. "I'll always regret this," she said, her voice barely audible. "I'll always regret losing you." I stood, placing the papers back in my bag. "I'm sorry it's come to this," I said, "but we can still handle this with respect. Let's give Olivia the stability she deserves, even if we can't be together." Jennifer nodded weakly, her tears falling onto the bedspread. As I left the hotel, the weight of the night pressed down on me, but I felt a strange sense of closure. The truth, as painful as it was, had finally come out. And now, I could begin the process of moving on. Our divorce happened quietly and calmly, a rare outcome for something so inherently painful. Jennifer and I both understood the need to protect Olivia from the storm that could have erupted. We were determined to keep things as peaceful as possible, and I'm grateful we managed to find compromises and understanding. We agreed to joint custody of Olivia. I moved into a modest home just a few miles away, close enough to be an active part of her life. It wasn't the same as waking up in the same house as her every morning, but it worked. Olivia adjusted better than I expected, and I credit Jennifer and myself for keeping things stable for her. If nothing else, we succeeded in being good parents through it all. A year and a half has passed since the divorce, and life has settled into a new rhythm. Jennifer has changed in ways I didn't anticipate. She started therapy shortly after we separated, and from what I've seen, it's helped her. She's also become more involved in church and various charity efforts. Whether it's to atone for her mistakes or find peace, I don't know, but I can see that she's trying to be better. As for me, I've stayed single. I haven't had the heart to look for a new relationship. Part of it is fear. Fear of being hurt again. Fear of making a mistake that could affect Olivia. But there's another part of me that isn't ready to move on, as much as I tell myself I should be. Jennifer hasn't dated anyone either, at least as far as I know. When we see each other, which happens often because of Olivia, I sometimes catch a look in her eyes. Hope. She doesn't say it outright, but I can tell she's waiting for something. For me to forgive her, maybe. For us to try again. The truth is, I'm not sure how I feel about that. There are moments when I miss what we had. The laughter, the connection, the sense of partnership we once shared. Sometimes I wonder if those memories are worth revisiting. Other times, I remember the betrayal, the lies, and the pain, and I feel like I'll never be able to fully trust her again. So here I am, caught between the past and the future, unsure of where to go from here. I want what's best for Olivia, and maybe that includes trying to restore our family. But I also need to protect myself, to be sure I'm making the right decision for all of us. Dear listeners, what would you do in my place? Would you give Jennifer another chance, or would you keep moving forward on your own? Maybe forgiveness is the key to healing, or maybe it's a door better left closed. I'm open to your thoughts because honestly, I don't know if I'm ready to take that step, or if I ever will be. If you enjoyed the story, please subscribe to the channel. I wish you a great mood and good luck.